All right, we are live. So welcome everybody. Welcome
Welcome,
especially
everybody.
to Ruth Croft. We are extremely excited about having Ruth on the live show. We get to ask her some awesome questions about her recent Western States win, and a little bit of a backstory about how she fell in love with running, fell out of love with running and back into love with running again. So I can't wait to talk about that. So for those of you who don't know who Ruth Croft is, she won the World Trail Run Champs in 2019. She also won the overall Golden Trail Series in 2018. 2021, she was second at Western States. And then this year, she won Western States, was second overall in a 17-hour 21 time, which I think is the third fastest time by a woman over that course in its 49-year history. So it's just phenomenal. And Ruth's also won many races in New Zealand. She's won Old Ghost, Ultra, Tarawera, and I think, Ruth, correct me if I'm wrong, but you won those outright as well, didn't you? You beat all the males, and just did so well. So welcome along, Ruth. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can say I won Tower outright, but I have to clarify our borders were shut, so no internationals were able to get in that year.
Modest as always. Modest as always, Ruth. And whereabouts are you at the moment? Whereabouts are we talking to you from?
I'm in Chamonix in France, so at Aotearoa, they've got a few houses here for us to stay in. So a lot of the athletes are training for one of the UTMB races, and so yeah, I've just come here to kind of get back into training and yeah, see where the fitness is at post a big break.
Yeah, awesome. Well, can we start? I mean, I'd really like to start at the beginning. So, I mean, you were born in a very small West Coast town on the South Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand. I think Stillwater. So I'd really love to just hear about how you found running, when you first realized that you were good at it, and then how you sort of progressed up to receiving a scholarship to an American college. So I'd love to just hear that first chapter really of your running journey. So yeah, can you fill us in on that one, Ruth?
Yeah, so I grew up in Stillwater, which is probably, yeah, you blink and you miss it. It's just north of Greymouth on the west coast of the South Island in New Zealand. And my family, I would say, we were pretty outdoorsy. Like we would go tramping, which is in Kiwi talk. It's when you hike into a hut and stay in a hut. And we do a lot of that. And then obviously, I think a lot of Kiwi kids, we do a lot of sport. And so I did basketball, tennis, netball, I did swimming and squash and all that. And at school, every year we would have cross-country meet and also an athletics meet. And naturally okay at them. And then when I think it was about 11, I got sent over to Christchurch to boarding school. And then started again, was just doing cross country at school and did well. And then I got a coach through after that, and then kind of started taking a bit more seriously running, but also still kept doing basketball and netball and all the other sports. And then in New Zealand, obviously a lot of Kiwis actually head over to the States on running scholarships. We kind of get scouted, I think, through our track times. And so I'd had a break. I just worked for 2 years post high school, and then I looked into heading to the States, and I ended up at Portland in Oregon, so at the University of Portland there.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, that's really interesting. I would love to get your take on, I mean, at the moment in New Zealand, with kids specializing in sport, how did you find having a mixture of sports growing up and developing? Did you find that helpful, or were your coaches trying to push you into just specializing in running and trying to get you to give up some of those team sports? I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think in high school, it's really important for kids not to take it too seriously. I think it's important that you don't do high mileage. You keep that enjoyment factor, keep injury free, like learn good technique. And then if you can get to 18 years and you still love the sport, that's when I think you can progress and get a bit more serious. my parents also didn't want me to solely focus on running. They thought it was really important to do a team sport and like have to work in with others, because running, it's a very individual sport. And so they really pushed me to keep that team atmosphere. And so I think I was pretty lucky in New Zealand as well, because I never ran on the roads, hardly ever ran on a synthetic track, actually. All our training sessions would be on a grass track. A lot of the time, even in bare feet. I did a lot of races early on in bare feet because my parents wouldn't buy me spikes until I showed that I was committed to training and everything. So I think I was pretty lucky in New Zealand with my upbringing, and as again with young ones, I think it's important in those formative years not to push the body too hard, because you're still developing, and to really just keep that enjoyment factor.
That's awesome advice. I think there's too many kids that are probably starting to specialize a little bit too early in sports, and losing that enjoyment factor. And when you lose that enjoyment factor, I think it's very hard to develop and to maintain consistency, and injuries can come about. So that's a really cool point of view from you, Ruth. And were you running a lot of like on trails early on, or was it mainly the track that you were running on through your sort of high school career? How did you sort of go there with the running?
Yeah, so I suppose I was doing trail running before I even knew it was trail running. Like our Sunday long runs would be in Christchurch, up the Port Hills. We were always running on trails there. And then like our midweek long run would be on trails. And then in New Zealand, it was very much in summer you did track. So we'd have interclub every weekend. And then after that, it would move to, I want to say you'd go to mountain running. So you'd do some mountain running races, then you'd move to cross country, and then you'd have road as well. So within the year, you had kind of doing 4 different disciplines. You weren't just sticking to the one. And so I think that helps as an athlete to become a bit more all-rounded and a bit more versatile than just sticking to, say, the track or even track and cross country.
Yeah. So, and when did you first feel like that you were on the radar for getting a track scholarship? I mean, how did that sort of come about? What times were you doing on the track? What was your distances there? And I'd like to sort of hear about that transition from sort of high school and then into Portland, Oregon. How did that sort of evolve?
Yeah, so I think I had coaches reaching out in my senior year at high school, and I think at the time I think it was like my PB was like 10:04 for the 3K and then 10:32 for the 3K steeple. I don't think I'd run a 5K on the track before then. And yeah, so I'd had coaches reach out, but to be honest, I wasn't really interested straight away. And then it wasn't until a couple of years later that I looked into it a bit more. And for me, it was really important to find a university that was the right fit, because I'd come from New Zealand where, I had a lot of freedom of running in the outdoors. And so I wanted to get to a university that really kind of embodied that too, because I didn't want to get stuck somewhere maybe in the South. Don't want to talk bad on Texas or like Florida or anything, where it'd be completely flat and I'd be running on the road a lot. And so my coach helped me a lot, and he would talk to coaches in the States and ask them if they trained on grass tracks, which he normally got a hard no that they didn't do that. But we decided on Portland because you've got the Forest Park there. And then Ian Solif was also said at the time that they were quite a lot more focused on cross country, which kind of felt like a better fit for me.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And then how did you find it? Because listening to some other interviews, you said you sort of got there and fell out of love with running, and I think then went to Taiwan. So what sort of happened there, and then how did you transition into moving to Taiwan and then falling back in love with running again?
Yeah, I suppose it was a very different atmosphere than what I was used to in New Zealand. Because I suppose in New Zealand, my coach, he kind of did it for the love of it. We ran on trails a lot, never ran on the road, and it was a very kind of close-knit community. And then I went to the States, and obviously the university system, it's very much more like a business. We had 25 girls on the team, and it was the top 7 that would travel would get on varsity and would travel. And so when you were a freshman on the team, I think I wasn't at a point where I was confident to pull back and make sure my easy runs were easy. And so quite often I found I was doing easy runs a lot faster than I normally would, and found there was a lot more intensity than what I was also used to. And I think it wasn't until kind of my senior year where I felt a bit more confident in myself to know what I needed to do. But during that period, I had a lot of injuries. I had 4 stress fractures, and yeah, it was just a bit of a different environment than what I was used to. And I kind of struggled a bit on the running side of things.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, because there are some people that go over there and thrive, and then others that it just doesn't fit with them, and they feel like it is like part of a system, like you've just said there. So that's really interesting. And then you moved to Taiwan and fell in love with trail running. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so my visa was up for the States and I had to leave. Didn't want to go back to New Zealand, and had been to China when I think it was like 15 or 16 for an athletics meet, and kind of just loved the culture and how vastly different it was to everything I knew. And so I didn't want to go to mainland China, though. I had decided on Taipei, Taiwan. It was kind of not a lot of thought went into it. It was kind of like I got a job teaching English. And so I was like, right, that's it. I'm going to move there. And then how did I find trail running? So when I arrived there, I actually didn't know anyone. And so I started going to the Hash Harriers, which I don't know if you might have it in the States. You can do it pretty much anywhere in the world. It's called the running club with the drinking club with a running problem. It's where you'll like all meet up in a location, and they have a hare, which is they go out, they have a bag of flour and chalk, and they'll go out, and it's normally in trails. They'll mark a route, and then 10 minutes later, everyone starts, and then you start running, and then you'll get to maybe a cross in the trail, and you don't know where the trail's gone. It could be anywhere in 360 degrees. And so everyone goes out and tries to find the trail again, the flour or the chalk, and everyone's yelling like on, and then that's when you know that they've found the trail. And you've got to try and catch the hare before you get to the finish. And normally afterwards, like you have a hash name, and everyone drinks afterwards and would have a meal. And so I kind of did that just as a way of meeting people, and actually got to see some like really cool locations around Taipei that there's no way I would have gone to if it wasn't for Hash Harriers. And so, yeah, I just kind of found my way back into running and did some road races and did some trail races, but it was never to get back into competition. It was just kind of for the fun of it, really.
Wow, well, that's really interesting. That sounds like a really cool club. I mean, I'm gonna have to look for a club like that around Tauranga, New Zealand, I think, because that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, also for people in the community, please, if you've got some questions for Ruth, we'll be opening up some questions, probably in about 10-20 minutes time. So if you've got any questions, please post them in the comments, and we'll try to get to them after we stop chatting a little bit anyway. So please, post those questions up. So then, Ruth, you became a professional trail runner in 2017. So how did that start? How did you become a professional trail runner?
Yeah, so while I was living in Taipei, I started just seeking out events that really interest me. So I went and did a race that started from Everest Base Camp, and then went to Mount Kinabalu in Borneo. It was a race that started and went to the summit of Mount Kinabalu and then back down. Went to Japan and raced to the top of Mount Fuji, and kind of was just doing these sort of races to mix in like traveling. I started getting some results, and then when I was living in Taiwan, obviously a lot of local races, and I got some sponsorship to begin with the North Face. And then I transitioned to working for Garmin. And so I was doing a lot of coaching for their running clubs at the time, and then also working for them in the office. And they financially actually helped me a lot be able to get to Europe and race, because I kind of got to the point where I was like racing in Asia was great, but I knew I needed to be in more competitive events. And And so it was really through their support that I was then able to, they would support me to go over early to Europe and race. But then it got to a point where it was quite hard to live in Taipei and train for races in Europe, because in the summer it's just humid as and just so hot. And then like probably 95% of my training was on a concrete river path. So I just got to the point where I felt like, I just couldn't keep doing that. And so I made the call to move back to New Zealand then. And split my time 6 months in New Zealand and 6 months over in Europe.
And your first big breakthrough, I suppose, was when you won the Golden Trail Series in 2018. I mean, that must have been incredible. So that's a series of races, and you placed well enough in all of those to win the outright title. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So the most of those races are like sub 50K, mainly around the marathon distance. But before that, I'd come over to Europe and done UTMB, CCC, the 100K, and then kind of Lavaredo 100, 120. But then I decided to switch back down in distance and do more of the marathon style races.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, that's amazing. And then you won the World Trail Run Champs in 2019. That sounds incredible as well. Did you?
Oh, second.
Oh, you're second then.
Yeah.
Second. Still
can't claim that.
Winning.
Still pretty good. So second there. And then did you feel like around that time, 2018-19, that you're starting to make some traction with your professional running career? Did you feel like you're starting to get noticed in New Zealand? Because for me, it felt like you were more recognized and more famous overseas than you were in your own country. And is that what you felt? And how did you feel about that?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I'd been racing in Europe from 2015, and so I felt like I'd been doing mainly most of my racing there. And obviously I hadn't lived in New Zealand for, I think it was nearly 11 years. And so it definitely felt like that. And so, I think once I started doing a few more races on home soil, that's kind of changed a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's now you're way more well known, especially in the running community. And it's just a shame you don't get more coverage on our media. I think New Zealand it's quite focused on rugby and netball, and I think we tend not to celebrate some achievements by incredible athletes like yourself, and that's a little bit of a bugbear of mine in this country for sure. I really hope that you get a little bit more coverage in New Zealand as your career progresses. Now, I'd really like to talk now about your Western States journey. So you first did Western States in 2021. You placed second. I think you were 9th overall in 17 hours 33, which I think gave you around the 6th or 7th best time ever. How did you approach going back to Western States this year? What was different? Mentally, how did you get yourself up for accomplishing this mammoth task again, and then actually coming through for the victory? I'd love to hear about that.
So I think last year I always like to do a lot of road when I head back to New Zealand. I don't like to run on trails for 12 months of the year, and I think doing road in turn helps with my running efficiency. It's refreshing to do something different, and I think that helps overall with speed on the trails. And since Western States is a very runnable 100-miler, it's got 7,000 of descent and 5,000 meters of vert. I don't know what that is in feet. Sorry if you're listening. I can't do that. And so I decided to stick with the road. I kept the road block last year, and then I found that when I transitioned to trail, I didn't have enough time. I think I did my last road race middle of April, and then by the time I recovered from that, it was a bit too tight. And then traveled to the States as well and got over travel. It was a very short block I had on trail. And so this year we changed it up a bit. while I was in New Zealand, I did a lot more trail. I did the road, but also incorporated a lot more trail work and the longer runs. And then also went over to the States earlier. So I got to the States 1st of May and then essentially had 2 months there to train. And I also went to Flagstaff for a month and then to Tahoe for the final month.
Oh, cool. Interesting. So just a little bit more specificity towards what you needed. And you felt that when you went into Western States this year that you're more prepared from that sort of training perspective?
Yeah, I was more prepared, but also had a lot more things in the build-up that didn't go well this year. Last year, everything went up, I think, a lot smoother. And this year I had an Achilles issue that started kind of end of April. And so, I had to do a lot of work on that. And then I got COVID 5 weeks out. And then I had a couple of sprained ankles as well, because I was with my Achilles, I was having to wear shoes with a high stack height. And then in turn, I kept going over on my left ankle. So it was just a lot of little things, obviously trying to say that they were little and that didn't go well. So I had to kind of manage those heading into it.
Now, how did you manage that? Because I did hear in another interview that you got yourself a mental skills coach. Is that correct? And so I'd love to know how that sort of worked and how you managed mentally to get through some of those challenges, those obstacles, leading into what was, one of the biggest races of your career.
So with COVID, I think for me, it was very much about not buying into it. Like I was in bed sick for 2 days and then had to kind of really knock back the intensity. And it was at the time when I was supposed to be doing kind of like peak mileage. And so mentally I approached that with, not letting myself fall into the trap that I'd ruined everything and just telling myself that I was totally fine. And then just, taking all the supplements I could to try and get over it. Because I think sometimes, you can get in a very negative headspace if you've got COVID and talk yourself out of the possibility of having a good race. And then I also worked with an energy healer. So not your conventional sports psychologist.
Right.
So I'd worked with him for a bit and it was just more about my approach to the race. And we talked a lot about bringing back the fun aspect. Because life's just one big game really, and so you might as well enjoy it. And then we also just talk about things. It was more looking at me as a whole than specific like sports psychology or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. That's so cool to hear, because I think a lot of the time, energy is such a cool topic, and we're responsible for the energy that we bring into a place, into a room. And I think it's really nice to have that holistic approach and understand that it's body, mind, and soul that we need to look at. It's not just one aspect, which I think our Western medicine system silos things off, which can, create more and more reductionist type problems. So it's really cool to hear that you did that and you found that really helpful. That's awesome.
Yeah, totally. And I think it was working on me as a person, not so much of the sole focus of becoming a better runner. It was just things that come up in my life, like how I was feeling at that time and working through those and then finding kind of where that was stemming from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. That's really cool to hear, because I think making yourself a better human is going to help you perform better in any sort of task in life. So I think once you sort of work on that aspect, that really does help create a better version of you. So that's really cool to hear. Now, I think we've got to move on to Western States. I want to hear, just take us through it. I mean, take us through the race in terms of your pacing strategy, and then a little bit about when you thought you had the win, maybe, and how you treated that. And I just want to hear about, how you managed that whole victory. It just sounds incredible.
So they say with Western States, the race doesn't start till Forest Hill. So that's at 100k in. So last year, my goal was always to get to Forest Hill, like using as little energy as possible and being ready to race from there. And so this year, I wanted to have the same approach, but obviously by Robinson Flat, which is 50K in, I was feeling like I was already working a lot harder than what I was at that point the previous year. But luckily I had my teammate, Emily Horgood, who was running with me. And if you meet her, she's like the most like bubbly, positive, like everything's great kind of person. And so we worked together essentially and just checked in on each other, made sure each was eating and drinking. And I think it really helped me mentally having her there, because I think that next stretch, the next 40K would have been quite tough. So we were in the lead at that point. And a lot of Western states, I don't believe it's all running ability. It's just about how well you can manage yourself on the day. So obviously make sure you're eating and drinking and then you're cooling, because I think they said it was the 8th hottest year. So it got up to 98, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But the good thing about Western states is it's 100 miles, but I think there's about 16 aid stations and there is ice at every aid station. And I think they allocate, I think it's 4 pounds. Is it 4 pounds? I don't know. It's like maybe not even that much. Yeah, around about that of ice per runner per aid station. So you've got plenty of opportunity to shove ice in your backpack and your bandana. And so, yeah, and then you go in and out of 3 canyons from the 50K mark to the 90K mark, to the 100K mark. And obviously there's water at the bottom of each canyon. And so I was just totally submerging, trying to get my core temperature down, and then getting out of the canyons. And then it was about the second to last canyon where I just kind of something clicked in me. And I kind of got into race mode, because before that I've been feeling like horrible. And was just trying to tell myself that it was going to be fine and that I'll get out of this kind of patch. And then I started to get in a bit race mode, and then obviously I see my crew at the 90K mark, and then again at the 100K mark, and then from the 100K mark you can actually pick up your first pacer. So I had a good friend, Alex Varner, who paced me, and yeah, he's a great talker, like can talk your ear off, and so that was great because it just took my mind away from running, and just great to have some company, mix it up a bit. And we got down to the Rucky Chucky, which was a river crossing, and then he climbed me out to Greengate, and then I switched to my partner Martin, who was my last pacer, who would take me through the finish. And I think I kind of dropped back a bit in pace there when I look at the splits, but I was never at that point, I had never felt that I had it in the bag, because as I've been doing my ankles and training and stuff, I was like, oh, it just takes like one mistake like that, and yeah, you could jeopardize your race. And so it was just focusing still on keeping moving. But luckily he was getting the splits from the woman who was second, and she was running the same pace as me, but wasn't kind of gaining or anything. But I think I never knew that like it was a guarantee until I got to the track at Auburn, really.
Wow.
Wow, that's awesome. I think that's some really good lessons for everybody there, isn't it? Just about one, getting a second wind. I mean, sometimes you're just feeling awful, but actually doing better than you think. And then also just focusing basically on every step in that last stanza of the race, because you didn't want to roll your ankle and you're just focusing on you. That's cool. I mean, how many minutes did you win by in the end? So how many minutes was the second place woman behind you?
I wouldn't know actually. Maybe 10 or 20. I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. Yeah.
Yep.
You're gonna suffer, but you're gonna be happy about it. So I feel like it's like the constant in ultras for sure.
Yeah, and like you said with ultras, like there's such a long way. You can have good moments, but you can have bad moments, and you can come out of those bad moments just as quickly as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Now, if anybody in the community's got any questions for Ruth, make sure you put them in the comments chat. We will get to them soon. So if you have anything that you're burning to ask one of the best trail runners in the world, then please, put some questions in. Now, what's the goals and plans from here, Ruth? I mean, you've done Western States. I've heard you're probably not heading back there again because you feel like you've sort of done that. What's your next goals? Are you looking to go into some other trail races, marathon? What's next for you?
Yeah, I probably will head back to States, but not next year. I think it's important. Like, I've had 2 really good experiences there, and I think it's time to step back. But I'd love to do UTMB next year, and so the goal was always to do Western States, because obviously that was my first 100 miler, and just time wise, it's a lot shorter than UTMB. So I thought it would be kind of a good introduction to 100 milers. And then, next year I need to get good at hiking, running in the dark, and all that sort of thing. So that's the plan.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have a quick question on what your recovery has looked like, because here at the Run Experience, we're all about like recovery, mobility, rest, etc. So we're really kind of, the burning question is like, what does your recovery look like after this 100 miler?
Yeah, so last year I did 3 weeks of completely no running. I went to Costa Rica and did a bit of yoga, but no running at all. And then I really struggled when I started back running. So this year I still had like probably, 3. I went to Mexico and obviously switched off again, but I did easy runs, like 20 minutes, just ridiculously slow, just to try and get the body moving a bit more, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. But I definitely take the recovery pretty seriously, because I felt like the last 2 years it's put me in a pretty big hole. And then, I started doing a bit of biking and a bit of running for the 4th week, but obviously I'm not on a program or anything. I just go how I feel. And then I've just been to Greenland fast packing, but everything's at a very low intensity. And so we're at, I don't know how many weeks removed from States, maybe 6, are we? But I'm only just getting on a program now, but it's all low intensity. I still don't feel recovered. And it's just like, I think 100 miles, it's the physical aspect, but also you got to take a lot into consideration the mental aspect. Like, there's a lot of energy that goes into preparing for a race like this. Whether you're an elite or even back of the packer, it's a long way. And so, I really like to switch off completely and then just ease my way back into it. And especially at the moment, I don't mentally feel ready to be on a start line yet, or ready to be pushing a lot, like having to go to the well.
Awesome. Yeah. So do you do any ice baths or foam rolling, mobility work, things like that?
I do a lot of yoga post 100 miles, and then I'll get a lot of body work done. And then obviously if I have access to a really cold river, I'll get in for ice baths and that, but that's kind of the extent of that.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. We do have some questions rolling in. Brad, I didn't know if you wanted to keep going. I think you might have had a couple more questions for her. Oh, did we lose Brad? Can you hear me, Brad?
Yeah, sorry. I think my internet went off there for a little bit. Sorry.
No worries. So we're just wondering if you had any more questions for her, because we do have some questions pouring in or coming in. Not pouring quite yet, but they are coming in. And I think you did have a couple for her. I want to make sure we get to all those.
Yeah. I think you mentioned it, but just talking about what I like to call other framework things that you do around your training. So you've talked about yoga, and you've talked about getting into some cold water. I saw that you were doing some Wim Hof training a little while ago, Ruth. Have you sort of done any Wim Hof stuff?
Yeah, so I've got a really good friend in New Zealand who's like an instructor in that, and does a lot of breath work. And so he's actually got a chest freezer in his garage. And so it's like, put that on for 24 hours, and then it gets iced up, and then he'll crash the ice, and then that lasts for a week. And so normally when I'm on the West Coast in New Zealand, I'll go around to his place and do an ice bath normally once a week. And I just like it for the mental side of it more than the physical. It's just like you get in there, and the first thing you want to do is get the hell out of there. So it's just about using your breath, like calming down like your sympathetic nervous system, and then just working with the mind a lot. Some days it's really easy and other days you struggle. And so, and that's what I love. And then we have a sauna next door. And so then we'll follow that up with a sauna. So it's a really good combo.
Oh, awesome. That sounds really, really good. And I suppose the other thing I wouldn't mind asking is how your training structure is going to change. Western States has been the focus for the last couple of years. Now they've got UTMB, which is obviously, as you said, it's longer in duration, and there's obviously more elevation. How will your training structure change over the next year as you prepare for UTMB?
Probably quite a bit. I think in New Zealand I'll still stick with the road and doing that over the summer, because I think it's really important. And then obviously I just need to get used to really long climbs. So I'll probably come over to Europe and have a bit more of a focus on getting in the mountains. I need to get more comfortable at running overnight, because I haven't really had much experience with that. I need to figure out nutrition for a race that's a lot longer. What else is there? And get used to using poles again. So I feel like there's a lot of aspects that I need to really kind of get better at, but also the specifics of training, I haven't kind of figured that out yet, but I will do.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. And I suppose touching on nutrition too, do you have any specific nutrition, way of eating? Are you a member of any sort of specific nutritional tribe, or how does that go for you?
The tribe of eating anything and everything. I was vegetarian for 7 years, and then that wasn't working for me. I started having dreams about chicken, and so I was like, okay, I think that's my body telling me that this is not working anymore. But I do avoid gluten for the most part. But apart from that, I eat everything. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, should we get into some of the community's questions, Liz?
Sure. We got one that's not listed in there that actually came directly from our app community. As a TRE member, they get kind of the first come first, the first serve, if you will, when we get questions like this. So she writes, this is actually our team captain, Sandra. I like to call her Sandra B. So she says, first off, thanks for taking the time to talk with the TRE coaches, and congrats on the Western States win. It was brilliant. You've had some health problems during the buildup in COVID when you got to the US. How did you tackle this mentally so close to your race? And for example, what's your mental approach / attitude with setbacks? And thank you. Keep it up.
Yeah. So I think with COVID, like I kind of touched on, it was just like, I think we hear a lot of like worst case scenario in the news and that can, and like I said, you can totally talk yourself out of the possibility of having a good race. And so for me, it was like, okay, I've got it. There's nothing I can do about this. And it's like, okay, so what can I do to get through this? And so it's taking like a lot of supplements, like getting on top of like magnesium, my fish oil, sulforaphane, like all your herbs and stuff, because I'm studying naturopathy, and so getting on your echinacea and then like the golden cell for my cough, and just taking each day as it come. And so it was like, obviously training, I had to knock back all the intensity, knock back my mileage for the most part. But yeah, and looking back at it, like I did not feel good at all in the rest of my build up. But it was just about telling myself that it's fine, everything's going to be fine, you're feeling good, when I clearly knew I wasn't feeling great. But it was just like a lot of positive talk and telling myself that it was going to be okay. And actually, it was like a week before the race, I had one 30-minute run where I actually kind of felt normal again. And so that gave me a bit of a boost. But I think often, like for me mentally, it's when everything goes perfectly well, like the lead up goes well, that it gives me a lot of confidence going into a race. And obviously that wasn't the case. And so I really had to work on like the mental aspect, which normally just came naturally to me. So yeah, I think it gave me an opportunity to work on that side of running, which I hadn't had to spend so much energy on. And I think it paid off in the end.
Yeah, I think like one big thing I think we can all say through COVID is that most of us are dealing with some sort of mental hiccups when it comes to our mental game, whether it's in training or during races. I mean, even myself personally experiencing that. So knowing that like the positive talk is a huge part of it. I think obviously we're all kind of going into the mental things with the ice baths and meditation as well, things that have helped me. So it's kind of really cool to hear that you are doing all those same things too. And I think the positive talk is really powerful, more powerful, I think, than a lot of people realize. So it's really cool to hear you say that.
And and I think it's important to remember, like, there's no such thing as like the perfect build up either. Like stuff's always going to go wrong. Like, you've just got to really learn to roll with it and like not put like, the more you focus on what's not going right, it's just energy that you're wasting on getting yourself back on track.
100%.
That's so cool. I think, the Stoics say that the obstacle is the way. And I think it's just really nice to hear that you had a pretty, disrupted build up to the Western States, and you won it, and you did, one of the best races of your life. So it's just really cool to hear that and your approach to that. It's really good. And I think there's a lot of people buying into fear, and as a physio, I hear a lot of people come in and they've got COVID and they don't want to get long COVID, and they don't want to do anything because they don't want to get long COVID. And I feel like sometimes people are just actually shrinking away and just fearful, and that doesn't help with recovery. So what you went through there, Ruth, with that, I think it's really, really encouraging for people out there.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, so we've got a question here from DJ Cross. Hi Ruth, how do you prep for a race with high temperatures?
Yeah, so last year I think actually my heat training went a lot better. So when I first got to the States, I did a week in Auburn. So the goal was to kind of do low intensity runs in the heat for that week. And then after that, it was every like 2 to 3 times a week I would try and get back into the heat. And I was lucky last year, all leading up to States, it was really hot. But this year it was the opposite. Like I really struggled getting the heat training in. And so I did do some sauna work, but to be honest, I also think you can overdo it. Well, my personal view is that you can also overdo it with the heat, especially for a race like States where you have like so much ice available to you. Like you have so many opportunities to get your core temperature down. And so even though it was super hot in Western States, I never felt like it was too hot. Like, and even last year was hotter than this year, and I don't feel that it was out of control or anything. So I think there are protocols out there, and you're best to follow that. But how I did it last year probably was, I did 1 week in the heat, and then every week 2 to 3 times I tried to run in the heat for 30 to 90 minutes.
So that's majority of that heat training. Is that, would you say that is in low intensity?
Yeah, most of it was in low intensity. Yeah.
Very cool.
So I think if you're doing too much high intensity in the heat, then it's just going to take longer to recover from too.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Ruth, have you tried? I mean, I was listening to an Andrew Huberman podcast just about cooling the body down, and I was reading something about face masks, like in terms of your cheeks and then also the palms of your hands. If you're putting ice or something cold there, it helps cool the body quicker due to, I think, basically an anammosis or some sort of venous return. So it just cools the body quicker with blood flow. Have you experimented with anything like that in terms of, I don't know, eye masks or ice gloves or anything like that? Have you heard about it or done anything like that yourself?
Yeah, my partner and I listened to the exact podcast by Huberman, actually. And he sent me a photo of an eye mask, a cooling eye mask, and was like, would you wear this? And I was like, no. I was like, it's a hard no. I was like, I'm drawing the line. I was like, I already look like an idiot in States with like the ice bandana, like the arm sleeves and everything. I was like, I'm not adding an eye mask. But you're right. Like, I think it's under the eyes. I think there's somewhere on the feet as well, balls of your feet. And then also, yeah, on the hands. And so we were trying to make sure my handholds were cold and kind of shoving. You don't want it to be like super cold. Like ice, but yeah, you want it to be cooling. So we were trying to do that. But yeah, definitely draw the line at the eye mask.
Awesome. All right. Looks like we got another question here from Lady Henry. I'm training for a half marathon. I'm running 6 miles for my long run. I'm currently fasting 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Any tips how to fuel? I'm wondering, is that 6
Is that a
p.m.
female?
a.m.? I believe so. We'll have to find out because it does matter. It truly matters.
Yeah. If I was a female, I would never be fasting and then running. I think that was kind of a fad that was going through, but for a female, that can be really detrimental to your hormones. And so I would, yeah, whatever you're doing, make sure to always have something before your run. Normally try to get like at least 100 calories, some protein. You should try and get, and then go for a run. I know men can, I think, get away with it a bit more, but especially females, yeah, because your cortisol's already elevated in the morning, and then you add the stress of running on top of it, and then that can throw out your hormones. So I think for females, it's really important about how you're fueling around your running. So always eating something before, and then within the 30 minutes post-run, getting in that, if it's a hard session, especially, or a long run, getting in that 30 grams of protein with your 2 grams of leucine, and then 90 minutes after that, getting in a proper meal. So yeah, I definitely do not recommend fasting and then running for females.
No, certainly not me.
Yeah.
Very good. Let's see. Oh, all right. We got another one here. Viva Frey, not official highlights. What is your favorite place that you have run so far? Also, who is your biggest supporter? What a great question.
One of my favorite places to run is obviously on the West Coast where I grew up. There's a trail called Old Ghost, which is 85 Ks. And that's probably one of my favorite trails. I'm probably a bit biased because that's where I've spent quite a lot of time. But also, who's my biggest supporter? Probably my partner, Martin. He's been doing all my crewing. He's amazing, knows exactly what I need at each aid station, and he brings a lot of fun to it as well. If you didn't notice, at the end of Western States, 3 of my crew were dressed up in dinosaur costumes.
Yes.
And so, yeah. And so I think it's important to have that fun aspect, and I can always rely on him to be helping with that.
That's awesome. Very good.
That's so cool. Yeah, I think the dinosaur that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I saw that all over the place. It killed me the first time I saw it. I was like, oh, that like gives you that more laid back atmosphere that you're like, oh, okay, cool. You know, I feel like for the people who are attending a 100 miler, if you're not running it, it's usually a big party. So like, I don't know, as a runner, I think I would appreciate the party happening around me and it not being so serious. So yeah. We did this next question. We did answer her in the comment section, but I did think that it would be cool to have you perhaps share your answer as well. Why, before I go for a run, I feel like I don't want to, but I push myself to anyways. And after the run, I'm so happy I didn't give into that feeling. How do I get out of that? Almost like a rut.
Not wanting to go for a run.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's the enjoyment aspect of it as well. I like when I'm going through those phases, I like to run with other people. And so I think you don't even think about it. You're like, okay, I'm running with so-and-so at this time there. So you just have to go and meet them. You don't have to go through that whole mental get yourself out of the door kind of thing. And so that's one way around it. Obviously, I'm still very performance orientated, and so I know like I need to train if I want to do well. But yeah, I think try to, yeah, and also like if you have a structured program as well, sometimes if it's not just a run, like making it a bit more interesting by doing some like fartleks or some different kind of session can make it a bit more enjoyable as well than going out and running the same pace or the same route every day.
Yeah, great points. Yes, because sometimes you got to enlist the friends again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I find myself that if I'm not meeting friends at 5 o'clock in the morning, there's no way I'm getting up. And having running buddies is one of the best ways to ensure that you're consistent with training. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
For sure. I know my friends have gotten me through some, especially as the runs got longer and my own training. I think having my friends there and like suffering with friends, you know, you get so much closer with them in such a short amount of time when you go through those longer runs together. So yeah, it's just suffer well, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Our next question is actually a friend of TRE's, Amy Enser. What shoes did you run in the Western States in? She got to test some Adidas Terex line and would love to hear your thoughts as well on that.
Yeah, so I was actually wearing a prototype for the first 100K, so that's not going to help Amy. But then I switched actually to a road shoe, the Road Carbon, the Aotearoa 2. Obviously, because I had those Achilles issues, so I needed something with a higher stack height, so I switched to a road shoe. But normally, if I don't have the Achilles, I run in the Terex Speed Ultra, which is kind of the one that I like the most. It's got the boost, and it's great for kind of your ultra distance races. It's especially good if you've got a narrow foot too.
Cool.
Awesome.
What's your take on the carbon shoes, Ruth? Have you tried much of them on the road, and how do you find them in terms of your performance?
I love them, Yeah, it definitely took a while to get used to them, but I feel like I haven't tried the Aotearoa Adios 3 yet, but the 2 is a huge improvement from the first one. I love them on the road, but also anything like a non-technical trail, I think you can get away with it too, but obviously kind of they don't last so long on the trails.
Yeah, for sure. Have you busted them out? Have you done a 5K park run recently, just sort of turned up with your carbon shoes and busted one out?
I definitely have not. I would not be in 5K park run even ability right now. I might like anything plotting pace I could do all day, but anything like I've just got no juice at the moment to step it up at all.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we got another question coming in here. I know what I would say, but I am interested to hear what you would say for this. This person says, I have weak knees and they often get achy. Is running still for me? Should I be worried about damaging my knees further if I run? And I never ran in my life. This is their first time.
I would say get yourself a good PT or physio. And obviously that I'm not, I don't have the skills to answer this question. But yeah, I think with running, it's important to get a good team around you. So someone who's good for massage, like a good physio, just people you can rely on when things aren't going well or injuries or that pop up. That's would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, and I think actually there's some really good studies out there that show that actually running in the right capacity and in the right amounts is actually really good for your joints. I think there's a real myth out there that mainly non-runners like to talk about, and saying that if you run, you're going to wear your joints out, when in fact, right. I think it's the opposite. And I think if you're running within your capacity and you're strong and you get your training right, I think running on the whole is very good for your joints. And so I would say to that question, just get strong and just start within your capacity and build up. And I think it's going to be actually helpful for your knees on the whole.
And I think something that often gets overlooked with runners as well is strength and conditioning. that can definitely help you get stronger, help with your bone density, and then also help prevent injuries, especially if you want to get into running longer ultras. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, actually, just touching on that, Ruth, can you tell us a little bit about your strength and conditioning? When do you put that in your program? And obviously for ultra running, it's really important to be strong. So how do you fit that into your training, and what do you do?
Yeah, I'm really lucky in New Zealand. Down in Wanaka, I've got a great strength and conditioning coach, Val Burke. And so when I head back to New Zealand, obviously she does a periodized training program for me. So at the beginning, it starts with a lot of range. And then obviously we kind of target every main muscle group, and then start with high reps. And then as the program progresses, it gets heavier and fewer reps. And then when I head overseas, I'd still religiously do it twice a week. Every week. I think that's helped me a lot, not only stay injury free, but just when you're running 100 miles, it helps you maintain your form to the finish. Yeah,
I bet. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's really nice to hear that you're doing that. I think that's one thing a lot of my athletes miss out on, is that they'll do their running program and then miss out on their strength and conditioning. And I try to let them know, and now I can say, hey, Ruth Croft does it. So, you guys are going to put this in. It's going to make you a better runner.
I think if you put, strength and conditioning is always the first thing to go with runners.
Yeah.
That's why I think we exist. We're the home of injury prevention. Strength train, please.
Just once a week.
Please, that's all you need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So we got another question rolling in here. Hi, everyone. I've been running consistently for about 50K per week since the last 5 years. Off lately, I observed my resting heart rate hovering around 37 to 42. Is it something to be concerned about? I feel like that's good. I mean, in the 40s, I feel like that's really good.
Yeah, it's hard to answer that question, isn't it, without a little bit more data. But I think if your resting heart rate's lowering, to me, generally that means you're getting fitter and a little bit more efficient. So it definitely shouldn't be something to be concerned about, I would think. What's your resting heart rate, Ruth? What are you at?
I think it's normally around 42. Yeah. I think men also, they normally have lower resting heart rates, if I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correctly, yeah.
Very good. I think that was the questions coming in. Let's see here. Yeah, everyone has given you a quick thank you, and so helpful. Cheers and keep being awesome. Let's see. Yeah, I think that was it for our questions coming in, unless we got another one. Let's see here. Yeah, no, I think that's it for questions. We are rolling up on the hour, actually. Did we have anything else we wanted to ask Ruth here? Anybody in the comment section? We are wrapping it up, so please submit your questions now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, it's been awesome, Ruth. It's been really cool just hearing your journey, and definitely just wish you all the best in the next little while. I mean, have you got any sort of longer we've heard about what you're going to do for the next year, and beyond that, have you got anything, other sort of aspirations or goals sort of in the long term, that sort of 2 to 5 year window? Anything else that we should know about?
No, not really. I don't really work on a 2 to 5 year plan. Normally just next year, running wise, it will be UTMB, and then I suppose I really want to do, obviously, get this degree in naturopathy, but apart from that, that's kind of me in a nutshell, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's just so cool, and I just hope you get a little bit more coverage in New Zealand, because what you've achieved so far is just absolutely incredible and really inspirational to the running community on a whole, not only in New Zealand but worldwide. So, congratulations again on your latest successes, and we'll, as the Run Experience, the channel, we're going to be following you and hopefully get you back on in a year or two and just have another chat. But it's just absolutely fantastic to see what you've done, and congratulations.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Liz. And thanks to the Run Experience for having me. It's been great chatting the last hour.
Yeah, same here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.